Ethan, a struggling single father, goes on a blind date his co-workers set up to cheer him up. But one small mistake, a wrong table, leads him to a woman who will change his life forever. Ethan Carter stared at his reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror, tugging at the collar of the only dress shirt he owned. It was clean, freshly ironed, and at least one size too big. His daughter Mia had insisted he wear the blue tie she'd made in art class, a crooked strip of fabric dotted with tiny glitter stars. He smiled despite the nerves twisting his stomach. "Daddy, you look handsome," Mia said, peeking from the doorway in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed bear, like one of those movie princes. He chuckled softly. "A greasy prince, maybe. You sure I don't look silly?" She shook her head, her ponytail bouncing. "Nope. You look perfect. Just don't forget to smile. Girls like when you smile." He crouched to her height, brushing a curl from her cheek. "Thanks, sweetheart. I'll be home before bedtime, okay? Aunt May's got you covered." "Promise?" she whispered. "Promise." He kissed her forehead, then stood, exhaling deeply as he grabbed his wallet, which had seen better days, and keys from the counter. A blind date. What had he been thinking? His co-workers at the auto shop had set it up after months of teasing him for acting like an old man at 33. They said Clara was kind, pretty, and looking for someone genuine. Ethan didn't feel like much of a catch. His hands were always rough with grease, his clothes secondhand, and his heart still carried the weight of losing his wife 3 years ago. Still, Mia had been so excited when he told her. "Daddy's going on a date," she'd sung all afternoon, twirling around the kitchen. Maybe tonight wasn't about finding love. Maybe it was just about remembering he was still alive. The restaurant, La Belle Maison, glowed like something out of a dream. Golden light shimmered through tall glass windows, and soft jazz played inside. Ethan hesitated at the door, glancing at the valet who looked him up and down, eyebrows arching slightly at his old pickup truck. He cleared his throat and stepped inside, the scent of roasted garlic and wine filling the air. Every table gleamed with crystal glasses and polished silverware. He immediately wished he'd gone for something simpler, like a diner. The hostess smiled politely. "Reservation name?" Carter. Ethan Carter. "I'm meeting someone, Clara." He adjusted his tie nervously. She checked the list. "Ah, yes. I believe she's already here. She mentioned she'd be wearing a blue dress." Ethan followed her gaze and spotted a woman near the window. Blue dress. Alone. Perfect. But as he approached, something unexpected caught his attention. The woman sat in a sleek black wheelchair. Her posture was elegant, her face calm but distant, framed by soft chestnut hair that shimmered under the golden light. She wasn't just beautiful. There was something haunting about her, like someone who had seen too much too soon. Ethan hesitated. His date hadn't mentioned anything about a wheelchair. But who cared? He wasn't the type to judge. He'd promised himself to be open-minded tonight. Maybe it was Clara, after all. Hi, he said, voice gentle. "Clara? Sorry I'm late. Traffic was awful." The woman looked up, startled, then studied him for a long second. Her lips curved faintly, a hint of mischief behind her soft eyes. "Clara?" she repeated, amused. "I haven't been called that in a while. Please sit." He blinked, uncertain, but her tone was kind, even teasing. So he sat. "I'm Ethan," he said awkwardly, trying to hide his confusion. "I hope I didn't keep you waiting too long." "Not at all," she said, folding her hands neatly in her lap. "You're different from what I expected." He scratched the back of his neck. "I get that a lot." She laughed lightly, a sound that seemed to surprise even her. "That's not a bad thing." They ordered. He picked something simple, a burger, though the waiter's raised eyebrow made him regret it instantly. She ordered salmon, graceful even in that small act. As they ate, the initial awkwardness faded. Ethan told stories about his daughter, how she built a castle out of car parts at his garage. Lila, though he didn't know her name yet, listened, eyes sparkling with quiet amusement. "You talk about her like she's your whole world," she said softly. "She is," Ethan admitted. "She's the reason I wake up every day. And the reason I'm scared to try anything new." Lila looked out the window for a moment, Fear isn't weakness, you know. Sometimes it's just a reminder that we still have something to lose. Ethan fell silent, surprised by the weight of her words. You sound like you've lived that. She smiled faintly, gaze distant. Maybe. He noticed then how her hand trembled slightly when she lifted her glass, how her legs didn't move beneath the table. And yet, she carried herself with strength that humbled him. There was no bitterness in her voice, only quiet resilience. You know, he said, smiling gently, you're not what I expected either. Oh, she asked, raising an eyebrow. And what did you expect? He chuckled. Someone who'd spend the night checking her phone or talking about herself. Instead, I get someone who actually listens. Her expression softened. It's been a long time since someone said that to me. The waiter arrived with a check, breaking the spell. Ethan reached for his wallet before she could stop him. Let me, he insisted. You don't have to. I want to, he said simply. It's the least I can do for a really good evening. For a second, her eyes shimmered with emotion. Thank you, Ethan. Just then, a voice called from across the restaurant. Ethan? Over here. He turned. A woman in a tight blue dress waved impatiently, phone in hand, glaring. His stomach dropped. Oh no. Lila's lips curved into a knowing smile. Looks like you've been sitting at the wrong table. His face flushed crimson. Oh, God, I'm so sorry. I thought. It's okay, she said softly, holding back laughter. Honestly, I'm glad you did. He blinked at her, speechless, then let out an embarrassed laugh. Well, this is officially the weirdest date of my life. Maybe the best one, too, she said quietly. He hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, maybe it is. He stood, fumbling for words. I should, go meet whoever that is, but I'm really glad I sat here first. So am I, she whispered. As he walked away, cheeks burning, he glanced back once. The mysterious woman in the wheelchair was still watching him, a soft, almost wistful smile on her lips. Neither of them knew it yet, but that wrong table had just changed both their lives. The moment Ethan slid into the real Clara's booth, he knew the night was doomed. She looked him up and down like she'd been handed the wrong meal at a restaurant. You're Ethan? She said, one eyebrow arching. You don't look like your profile picture. Ethan cleared his throat. It was taken 5 years ago. She smirked, sipping her wine. Clearly, you could have at least ironed your shirt better. He bit back a sigh. It was ironed by a 7-year-old. He almost added. The waiter came by, and she ordered 2 appetizers, because I can't eat just one thing. Ethan just asked for water, his appetite gone. Clara launched into a monologue about her exes, her job at a boutique firm, and her strict no single parents rule, which, ironically, she'd learned about only after they'd sat down. I just don't get how someone could raise a kid alone, she said casually, as if discussing the weather. That's exhausting. Ethan smiled politely, though inside he was counting down seconds. It's not easy, he admitted, but worth every second. She rolled her eyes, scrolling through her phone. That's cute. When she excused herself to take a call, Ethan exhaled and rubbed his temples. He couldn't help thinking about the woman at the other table, the calm grace in her voice, the way she had really listened. He'd never felt that kind of peace with a stranger before. A few minutes later, Clara came back, declared she wasn't feeling it, and left halfway through her meal. Ethan just sat there, speechless, as the waiter brought the check. He paid, again, and walked out into the cool night air, his head spinning. The city lights blurred around him as he headed toward the parking lot. But something stopped him halfway. Across the street, a sleek black car waited near the restaurant entrance. A man in a suit opened the back door, and Ethan saw her, the woman from the wrong table. Her brown hair shimmered under the streetlight as the driver helped her into the car. Lila Bennett. He didn't know her name yet, but it would be one he'd never forget. She noticed him watching and smiled faintly, almost shyly. He gave a small, embarrassed wave before turning toward his truck. That should have been the end of it. Just a strange, sweet accident. But fate wasn't done with them yet. The next morning, Ethan was back at Carter Auto Repairs, elbow deep in an old sedan. The rhythmic clink of tools and smell of oil grounded him, helped him forget how awkward the night had been. His co-workers, however, were not going to let him off easy. So Romeo teased Jake, the youngest mechanic. "How'd the big date go?" Ethan grunted, tightening a bolt. She left after 15 minutes. "Yikes," said Leo, whistling. "You sure you didn't bore her with spark plug stories again?" "Actually," Ethan said, smirking, "I sat with the wrong woman first." That got their attention. "What?" Jake laughed so hard he dropped his wrench. "Bro, how do you even do that?" Ethan just shrugged, hiding a grin. "She was wearing blue, okay? And she smiled at me first. Thought it was her. And..." Leo leaned in. "Was she mad?" "Not at all. We talked. She was different." The teasing faded as they heard the tone in his voice. Soft, reflective. "Different how?" Jake asked. "She didn't care who I was. She just listened." Ethan smiled faintly. It felt like talking to someone who's been lonely for a long time. Jake raised an eyebrow. "You get her number?" "No." Ethan shook his head. "Didn't seem right. I'd already embarrassed myself enough." The bell above the shop door jingled. Ethan looked up to see a tall man in a dark suit, carrying an air of authority that didn't belong in a greasy garage. "Ethan Carter?" the man asked. "Yeah. Can I help you?" "I'm from the Bennett estate," the man said crisply. "Ms. Lila Bennett requested your service. Her car, an old Bentley, requires restoration. You come highly recommended." Ethan blinked. "I don't usually work for private estates," he said slowly. "They must have luxury mechanics for that." "She was quite specific," the man replied, handing him a card embossed with a golden bee. "She insisted on you. The job pays double your usual rate." Jake mouthed woe behind him. Ethan hesitated. It could be a scam, but something told him it wasn't. That name, Bennett, sounded familiar. Then it clicked. Bennett Industries. One of the largest corporate names in the country. "Tell her I'll come by this evening to take a look," Ethan said finally. "Excellent," the man said, turning to leave. "The address is on the card." As soon as the door closed, Jake whistled again. "Dude, you're going to a mansion." Ethan stared down at the card. A gold embossed address. A strange flutter in his chest. Could it really be her? That evening, Ethan drove up a long, winding driveway lined with tall oaks. The Bennett estate rose before him like something out of a magazine. Marble pillars, glass balconies, and sprawling gardens lit with fairy lights. He parked near the side entrance, still in disbelief. A maid greeted him politely and led him through polished hallways that smelled faintly of roses. Paintings lined the walls, each one signed L. Bennett. "She paints?" he asked quietly. The maid smiled. "Yes, sir. Miss Bennett paints everything you see here." Then they entered a bright conservatory filled with sunlight and the faint hum of piano music. There she was, sitting by a grand window, brush in hand, sunlight catching her hair. Lila turned as he entered, and her face broke into a smile that reached her eyes. "Ethan Carter," she said softly. "I was hoping you'd come." He froze, torn between awe and confusion. "So it was you." "Guilty," she said, setting down her brush. "And before you panic, I didn't call you here to make fun of the mix-up." He laughed nervously. "I deserve it if you did." "Actually," she said, her voice gentle, "I just wanted to thank you for sitting at the wrong table. For making me laugh," she said simply. "It's been a long time since anyone did." Ethan met her gaze, seeing something there, loneliness, yes, but also light. "Well, glad I could help. You mentioned a car." Her smile widened. "My mother's old Bentley. It hasn't moved in years. I'd like you to bring it back to life." He followed her outside to a separate garage. The car gleamed under a tarp, elegant even in dust. He ran his hand along the hood reverently. "She's a beauty. She was my mother's pride," Lila said quietly. "After the accident, I couldn't bear to touch it. But maybe it's time." He turned to her. "You were in the accident?" "Yes." Her voice didn't waver. 3 years ago. I lost more than movement that night. I lost who I thought I was. Ethan hesitated, then said softly, "Maybe fixing this car can be your way of moving forward." Her eyes met his. "And maybe you can help me do that." He nodded slowly. "Then let's start." She smiled, the kind that could light a dark room, and for the first time since her accident, she felt hope stir again as Ethan opened the car's hood. The faint scent of oil and memory filled the air, and somewhere between the dust and the silence, two lives began to intertwine, born from one mistake that no longer felt wrong at all. The next few days passed in a blur of metal, laughter, and quiet conversations. Every morning, Ethan drove to the Bennett estate, toolbox in hand, and spent hours working on the vintage Bentley. Every afternoon, Lila rolled into the garage with coffee in one hand and curiosity in her eyes. It became their routine. Sometimes she sat quietly, sketching while he worked, her soft pencil strokes blending with the rhythmic click of his tools. Other times, she asked questions about everything, from carburetors to car paint, pretending to be interested in mechanics, though Ethan suspected she just wanted to keep him talking. He didn't mind. He liked the way she listened, like his words mattered. One morning, as he wiped grease from his fingers, Lila asked softly, "Why did you become a mechanic?" Ethan paused, thinking, "Guess I like fixing things. My dad was a truck driver, always away. When he came home, something was always broken, the sink, the radio, the car. I figure if I learned to fix things, maybe life wouldn't fall apart so easy." Lila tilted her head. "Did it work?" He smiled faintly. "Not really. Some things can't be fixed with tools." Her gaze softened. "Your wife?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Cancer. Mia was 4. I thought I'd never laugh again." He glanced at her. "Then I did. With you." Her lips curved slightly. "I could say the same." They didn't speak for a moment, the silence heavy but comfortable. Two broken hearts, finding a strange kind of peace among the hum of an old engine. That night, long after Ethan left, Lila sat in her room by the window. The city lights twinkled below like 1,000 scattered stars, but she wasn't looking at them. She was scrolling through her tablet, reading an article her assistant had found. Single father raises daughter alone after tragic loss. The mechanic who refuses to give up. It was him. A small-town news story from 2 years ago. The photo showed Ethan in his greasy overalls, carrying a sleepy little girl on his shoulder. Both were smiling, not with wealth or comfort, but with love. Lila's chest tightened. So that's who he is, she thought. Not a man chasing money. Not a man pretending. Just real. When her father had his accident, when she lost the use of her legs, the world had started treating her differently. Pity in people's eyes had become routine. Polite sympathy replaced honesty. But Ethan looked at her like she was whole, not broken. And that, she realized, scared her more than anything. The next morning, Ethan arrived to find the Bentley already rolled out of the garage. Lila was there, sipping coffee, looking radiant under the sunlight. "Morning," he greeted, pulling off his gloves. "You're early." "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Too much on my mind." "Want to talk about it?" She hesitated. "Do you ever feel like people see only what they want to see? Like no one really knows you anymore?" Ethan smiled wryly. "Every day. At work, I'm the quiet guy with the sad eyes. At Mia's school, I'm the poor dad who tries his best. But none of them know what's in here." He tapped his chest. She looked at him for a long time, her throat tight. "That's exactly it." He leaned against the car. "Then I guess we both know how that feels." They shared a look, deep, wordless, honest. It was a kind of connection that didn't need fixing. Later that afternoon, while Ethan worked, a shadow crossed the doorway. A tall man in a tailored suit stood there, watching with an expression of cool authority. His presence filled the room instantly. "Miss Bennett," he said sharply. "A word." Lila's expression froze. "Father." Ethan straightened. The resemblance was obvious. Same sharp jaw, same piercing eyes, though Charles Bennett's carried decades of power and calculation. Charles stepped closer. "Who is this man working in my garage?" Lila's voice steadied. He's a mechanic, father. I hired him. Charles's eyes narrowed. You could have hired 10 professionals. Instead, you bring this? He gestured at Ethan, dismissive. Do you even know who he is? I know enough, Lila said evenly. He's kind. That's not a qualification. Charles's gaze turned to Ethan. Mr. Carter, I assume? How much is my daughter paying you? Ethan wiped his hands calmly. Nothing yet, sir. Haven't finished the job. You'll get double to stop coming here. Lila gasped, Father. Ethan froze, then exhaled slowly. Sir, I don't want your money. Charles's voice sharpened. Everyone wants money. Not me, Ethan said quietly. I came here to fix a car, not chase your wallet. The billionaire studied him for a moment, clearly unused to such calm defiance. I've seen your type, Carter. Good manners, humble charm, all hiding a hungry ambition. Stay away from my daughter. Ethan's eyes didn't waver. With respect, sir, I think your daughter can decide who she talks to. Lila's breath caught. Her father's glare hardened, but Ethan only turned back to the car. I'll finish the job by next week, he said simply. After that, you won't have to see me again. Without waiting for a reply, he packed his tools and left. That evening, Lila sat on her balcony, the soft of city life below her. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. Sorry about today. Didn't mean to cause trouble. You don't owe me anything. But I meant what I said. You're stronger than you think. She stared at the message for a long time before typing back. You made me laugh when I've forgotten how. That's worth more than all my father's money. The following week, Ethan didn't come back. He couldn't. Not after being treated like that. Not when his pride, small as it was, still mattered. But every time he tucked me into bed, he caught himself glancing at his phone, half expecting another message. Meanwhile, at the Bennett mansion, Lila sat by the unfinished Bentley, tracing her fingers along the hood. For the first time in 3 years, she felt lonely in a way she hadn't before. Not for pity, not for comfort, but for something real that had slipped away too soon. Finally, she turned to her assistant. Find out where Ethan Carter is, she said quietly. Please. 2 days later, Ethan was wiping down a hood at the shop when a sleek black car pulled up outside. Everyone stopped to stare. Lila's driver stepped out. Mr. Carter, he said formally. Miss Bennett would like to see you. Ethan's stomach twisted. Tell her I appreciate it, but I'm busy. The driver hesitated. She said to tell you this. He unfolded a small card. Some things can't be fixed with tools. But maybe we can fix each other. Ethan stared, heart pounding. He wiped his hands, grabbed his jacket, and whispered his coworker, Cover for me. As he drove toward the estate again, he couldn't stop smiling. When he arrived, Lila was waiting outside, the Bentley behind her now shining like new. Her father's staff had finished the cosmetic work, but it was still incomplete. You came, she said softly. He nodded. Couldn't let a car go half-fix. She smiled knowingly. Or maybe you couldn't let me go half-fix. He laughed quietly. Maybe both. As they stood there in the golden light of late afternoon, the tension between them faded, replaced by something real, something fragile yet strong. Neither said the word love. Not yet. But both knew that sometimes fate doesn't make mistakes. It just disguises miracles as accidents. When Ethan stepped back into the Bennett mansion, something inside him felt different. The last time he'd been there, he'd left with his pride bruised and his heart confused. Now, as he walked through the same marble hallway, the nervousness was still there, but so was warmth. Lila waited in the conservatory, sunlight spilling to the tall glass walls and scattering over her wheelchair like gold dust. She was wearing a simple cream sweater, hair pulled into a loose bun, a sketch pad resting on her lap. For a long second, they just looked at each other. Hi, she said softly, breaking the silence. Hi, he replied, hands shoved in his jacket pockets. You sure I'm not going to get escorted out again? A smile tugged at her lips. My father's in London this week. Consider this neutral ground. He chuckled. Good to know. I don't think I can handle another billionaire death stare. She laughed, really laughed, and the sound made his chest tighten. It had been a while since he'd seen her so unguarded. "Come on," she said. "I want to show you something." She led him outside to the garage, where the Bentley gleamed under morning light. Ethan's eyes widened. The bodywork had been polished, the chrome restored, but the hood was still open, the engine half finished. "I had the staff do the easy part," she explained, "but I saved the heart for you." "The heart?" he asked, amused. She nodded. "You once said every car has a heart." I listened. He smiled, shaking his head. "You really did, didn't you?" "I listen more than people think," she said, her voice quiet but sure. "Most people talk to me like I'm fragile. You didn't." "I didn't see a reason to," he said honestly. "You're stronger than you know." Something flickered in her eyes. Hope, maybe even affection. "You always say things like that. Makes it hard to stay sad around you." He swallowed the lump in his throat. "Guess that's a good thing." As Ethan worked, Lila watched. He moved with calm confidence, hand steady, every motion purposeful. There was something deeply soothing about the way he focused. No pretense, no hurry, just presence. "Do you ever think about what you'd be doing if life hadn't turned out the way it did?" she asked after a while. He paused, tightening a screw. "All the time. But then I remember, if life hadn't turned out this way, I wouldn't have Mia, and she's everything." Her lips curved faintly. "You love her a lot." "She's my world," he said. "The best thing I ever built." Lila smiled, though her chest ached with something unfamiliar. Longing. "She's lucky to have you." "I think it's the other way around," he said softly. That weekend, Lila asked him to bring Mia along. Ethan hesitated at first, worried she might feel out of place. But Lila insisted. "I'd like to meet the girl who owns her father's heart," she said with a wink. So that Saturday, Ethan's old pickup pulled into the Bennett driveway, and out came Mia, wearing her best pink dress and clutching a homemade card. "Wow," she whispered, staring up at the mansion. "Daddy, is this a castle?" "Sort of," he said, smiling nervously. "Just remember, be polite, okay?" Lila was waiting on the patio, a tray of cookies beside her. When Mia saw the wheelchair, she didn't freeze or look confused. She just smiled. "Hi, I'm Mia. Are you Daddy's friend?" Lila's heart melted instantly. "I think so," she said warmly. "And you must be the artist who made his tie." Mia giggled. "You saw it? Daddy said it was too special to wear twice." Ethan groaned. "Mia..." Lila laughed. "He's right, it's beautiful." Within minutes, the two were chatting like old friends. Lila showed Mia her sketchbooks, and Mia eagerly flipped through each page, admiring the paintings of flowers, cityscapes, and one unfinished portrait of a smiling woman. "Who's she?" Mia asked. "My mother," Lila said softly. She loved painting, too. Mia studied it carefully. "She looks kind, like she'd make cookies with you." For the first time in years, Lila felt tears sting her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Exactly like that." Later that afternoon, while Mia chased butterflies in the garden under the housekeeper's watch, Ethan and Lila sat together beneath a canopy of ivy. "She's incredible," Lila said quietly, so full of light. "She gets that from her mom," he said with a bittersweet smile. "She used to say love's not what you get, it's what you give away." Lila looked at him, her voice trembling slightly. "You still believe that?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, because even after everything, I still have love to give." Their eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. The air between them shifted, gentle but electric. She wanted to reach for his hand, but instead, she whispered, "Then maybe you're not the only one." That night, after Ethan and Mia left, Lila couldn't sleep. She wheeled into the art studio, heart racing. She picked up her brush and began to paint, not a landscape or a memory, but him, the way he smiled when talking about Mia, the quiet strength in his posture, the warmth that had reached into the coldest parts of her heart. She didn't notice the hours passing until dawn began to color the sky. When her father returned 2 days later, he found the painting drying on the easel. He stared at it for a long time, his face unreadable. "This is a mechanic, isn't it?" Charles asked finally. Lila looked up from her chair, calm but firm. Yes, his name is Ethan Carter. Charles's jaw tightened. I told you to keep him away. You told me to stay miserable, she said evenly. I'm done doing that. His voice softened, weary. Lila, I only want what's best for you. Then maybe stop deciding what that is. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Charles sighed, turning toward the door. He'll only hurt you, Lila. The world doesn't mix our kind. She whispered, maybe the world's wrong. The following morning, Ethan received a letter at his shop. It wasn't from Lila, but from her father. Mr. Carter, please refrain from further contact with my daughter. I trust you understand what's at stake. Charles Bennett. Ethan folded the letter quietly, pain tightening in his chest. For a long time, he stood there, staring at the Bentley's photograph pinned above his workbench. Mia came running up, clutching her backpack. Daddy, you okay? He forced a smile. Yeah, sweetheart. Just tired. But deep down, he knew this wasn't over. Some things were worth fighting for, and for the first time in years, his heart felt alive again. That evening, Lila texted him anyway. My father can't see what I see in you, but I do. Don't give up yet. He stared at the screen, the words like a spark in the dark. Then he typed back, I won't. Some things are worth fixing. And though miles apart, both smiled at their phones, hearts connected by a mistake that had turned into destiny. The Bennett mansion glowed with chandeliers at night. Charles Bennett's annual charity gala was the event of the season. Politicians, investors, and celebrities mingled under grand arches, all dressed in glittering black and gold. And yet, Lila didn't want to be there. She sat by the window of her suite, watching limousines pull up one after another. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses echoed through the halls. She used to love these nights, before the accident, before pity replaced admiration in people's eyes. Now, every compliment felt like a condolence. But tonight, her mind wasn't on the guests. It was on Ethan. Her phone buzzed. You okay? Long day at the shop. She smiled faintly at the message, fingers hovering over the keys. She wanted to tell him she missed him, that she still saw his face when she painted, that her father's words still echoed but didn't matter anymore. Instead, she typed, big event tonight. Wish you were here. He replied, almost instantly, I'd probably spill oil on someone's tux. She laughed under her breath. I'd still choose you over every man in that ballroom, she whispered to herself. But fate had other plans that night. Downstairs, Charles Bennett stood near the stage, shaking hands with Senator when he overheard two guests whispering, Did you see the mechanic in the driveway last week? One said, The one with the beat-up truck? Apparently, Miss Bennett's been seeing him privately. Charles's jaw tightened. His smile froze, and his grip on the champagne glass turned white-knuckled. When the band struck up a slow waltz, he excused himself and walked toward the stairs with purpose. Lila had just begun descending, wearing a navy gown that shimmered softly under the lights. Her hair was loose, falling over her shoulders in waves, and for once, she looked like the woman she used to be, strong, radiant, fearless. The crowd turned to admire her, but Charles wasn't smiling. He took the microphone from the announcer mid-sentence. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice calm but cold. Before we proceed with tonight's program, I'd like to address something personal. Lila froze on the last step. Some of you may have heard rumors, he continued, eyes scanning the crowd. Rumors about my daughter keeping unfit company. Whispers rippled through the room. Cameras lifted. Let me assure you, he said sharply, I will not allow anyone to exploit her condition or this family's name. Lila's heart pounded. Dad, she whispered, mortified. Charles turned to her. He's a mechanic, Lila. A man with no education, no standing. You think he cares for you? He sees your last name, not your heart. The room fell silent. Lila felt every eye on her, every breath suspended. She gripped her wheels, voice trembling but strong. You're wrong. Her father blinked, surprised. He doesn't want my money. He fixed your car for free, remember? He never asked for anything. He just saw me as a person when no one else did. Lila, No, you listen. Her voice cracked. You think love only exists in your circle of power and money, but it has more dignity than half the men in this room. Gasps fluttered around them. Charles's face darkened. Enough. You're going upstairs now. But Lila didn't move. I'm not your project, father. I'm your daughter, and I'm allowed to choose who makes me happy. Meanwhile, Ethan stood across the street, hidden behind the crowd of reporters. He hadn't meant to come, but after her text, he couldn't stay away. He just wanted to see her smile one more time. Then he heard it, her father's words, loud and cutting, echoing through the open doors. A mechanic, unfit company. He felt the shame burn in his chest. Every instinct told him to walk away. But when he saw Lila defending him, his throat tightened. She was trembling, fighting for him in front of hundreds. And that's when he made the hardest choice. He waited until the crowd dispersed, then sent her a message. Don't fight him for me. He's right about one thing. I don't belong in your world. Her reply came seconds later. You belong in mine. That's all that matters. But he didn't respond, because deep down, he knew what would happen next. Her father would make her pay for it, and he couldn't be the reason she suffered again. So he left. The next morning, Lila waited for him at the garage. But Ethan wasn't there. The tools were gone, the shutters down. A single note was pinned to the door. Thank you for letting me see what kindness looks like again. Ethan. She sat there for an hour, tears sliding down her cheeks silently. It wasn't anger that hurt most. It was the emptiness, the way the world looked the same, yet nothing felt right anymore. Weeks passed. Lila's father believed the silence meant victory. He was wrong. She stopped attending charity events, stopped painting, stopped smiling. One evening, he entered her art studio and found her staring at a blank canvas. You haven't painted in months, he said gently. I thought art brought you peace. She didn't look up. It did, until you took the reason for it away. He swallowed hard. I was protecting you. No, she said quietly. You were protecting your pride. Charles stood there, guilt flickering in his eyes. He left without another word. Across town, Ethan worked late nights at a small repair shop, grease under his nails and exhaustion in his bones. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her laughter, her courage, her trembling voice saying, you belong in my world. He told himself he'd done the right thing. That walking away had saved her from scandal, from pain. But it didn't feel like saving. It felt like breaking. One rainy evening, Mia found him sitting alone at the kitchen table, staring at an untouched cup of coffee. Daddy, she asked softly, are you sad again? He smiled weakly. Just tired, pumpkin. She climbed onto his lap, holding out a small piece of paper. I drew you something. It was a crayon drawing of him fixing a car, with a woman beside him, smiling from her wheelchair. This is your friend, she said, the one who makes you happy. He swallowed hard, tears blurring his vision. Yeah, he whispered. She really did. That night, he opened his old phone and stared at her last message again. You belong in my world. And for the first time in weeks, he whispered back to the empty room. Then maybe it's time I find my way back. Rain swept across the city in thin silver sheets. Ethan Carter stood in the doorway of his small shop, watching the storm soak the streets. The for sale sign he'd nailed to the window that morning creaked in the wind. He was done. He'd lost his job at the Bennett estate, lost a little bit of peace he'd found there, and no amount of overtime could fill that hollow ache in his chest. Then his phone buzzed. It was a message not from Lila, but from Charles Bennett's assistant. Mr. Bennett requests your urgent presence at the mansion. Mechanical emergency. Ethan frowned. That didn't make sense. He hadn't heard from the Bennetts in months. Still, something told him to go. He wiped his hands, grabbed his tool bag, and drove out into the rain. The mansion loomed like a shadowed fortress against the gray sky. Ethan parked his truck at the side gate, half expecting security to turn him away. But instead, the guard nodded. He's waiting in the east wing. When Ethan stepped inside, the air smelled faintly of smoke. One of the mansion's backup generators had malfunctioned. leaving half the estate in darkness. Charles Bennett stood near the hallway, phone in hand, expression tight. He looked older, weary, like a man haunted by something heavier than business. "Mr. Carter," he said finally, lowering his phone. "Thank you for coming." Ethan set his bag down, uncertain. "You could have called anyone else." Charles's gaze flickered. "You're the only one who's ever fixed something here that actually mattered." The word surprised Ethan. "Follow me," Charles said. He led him through the halls toward the conservatory. When they entered, Ethan froze. Lila was there, by the window, pale and quiet, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to move her wheelchair. The battery had died in the outage. She looked up, and when her eyes met his, time stopped. "Ethan?" Her voice cracked, fragile but full of disbelief. He took a hesitant step forward. "Hey!" She blinked rapidly. As if afraid he'd disappear if she looked too hard. "You came back." "I got a call," he said softly. "Didn't know it was you." Charles cleared his throat quietly. "I didn't tell him. I just thought you might need a friend." For the first time, there was no anger in the older man's tone, only regret. As Ethan worked on the wheelchair's control module, Lila watched him in silence. The rhythm of his movements, the calm in his presence, it all came rushing back, like the warmth of sunlight after a long winter. "You shouldn't have left," she whispered. "I thought it was the right thing," he said without looking up. "It wasn't." Her voice trembled. "You think my father's disappointment hurts more than losing you did?" He finally met her eyes. "I didn't want to ruin your life." "You made my life," she said fiercely. "You gave it color again." The generator hummed back to life, lights flickering overhead. Her chair beeped softly as power returned. But neither of them moved. They just looked at each other, everything they hadn't said hanging in the air. Charles stood quietly at the doorway, unseen for a moment. He watched his daughter smile, really smile, for the first time in months. He remembered the way she used to be before the accident, vibrant, fearless, alive. And he realized something he'd been too proud to admit. That young mechanic had done what all his money couldn't. He'd given her back her spirit. When Ethan rose to leave, Charles stepped forward. "Carter," he said, his tone softer than before. "A word, please." Ethan hesitated, then followed him into the hall. "I owe you an apology," Charles began. "I thought keeping you away was protecting her, but I see now it only broke her further." Ethan's brow furrowed. "You don't owe me anything, sir." "I do," Charles said firmly. "You cared for her when I couldn't even look past my pride. You saw her, not her chair. That's worth more than any degree or bank balance." Ethan said nothing, but his eyes softened. Charles exhaled. "I'm hosting the Hospital Foundation Gala again next week. Lila refuses to attend. She says those rooms make her feel invisible." He looked at Ethan meaningfully. "Maybe if you were there, she wouldn't feel that way." That night, Lila found Ethan still in the conservatory, packing up his tools. "Are you leaving again?" she asked quietly. He smiled faintly. "Not unless you tell me to." "I'd never do that." He hesitated, then brushed a hand through his hair. "Your father invited me to the gala." Her eyes widened. "He did?" "Yeah. Said you wouldn't go without a reason." She gave a small, trembling laugh. "Then I guess now I have one." For the first time since they met, she reached out and took his hand, tentatively, shyly. His fingers closed around hers, strong and warm. "You fixed my chair again," she whispered. He smiled. "Just doing my job." "No," she said softly, meeting his eyes. "You fixed me." The night of the gala arrived. When the guests turned toward the entrance, they fell silent, not because of the designer gowns or glittering chandeliers, but because of the woman entering the hall. Lila Bennett rolled forward in a flowing silver gown, chin high, confidence radiating from her like light. And beside her walked Ethan Carter, in a borrowed tuxedo, hand resting gently on her chair. Charles watched him from the stage, pride and peace softening his features. For the first time, there were no whispers, only admiration. When the speeches ended, Lila leaned toward Ethan. "You know, if you hadn't sat at the wrong table that day." He smiled. you'd still be waiting for the right one. She laughed through tears. Guess fate's better at matchmaking than people think. He chuckled, squeezing her hand. Best mistake I ever made. As the orchestra played, Charles approached him slowly, a glass of champagne in hand. "May I?" he asked, nodding toward Ethan. Ethan stepped aside respectfully, and Charles leaned closer to his daughter. "You look like your mother tonight," he said quietly, "and she'd be proud of you for choosing love over fear." Lila's eyes shimmered. "I think she'd like him, too." Charles smiled. "I already do." He turned to Ethan. "You've earned my respect, son. Just don't make her cry again." Ethan grinned. "Wouldn't dream of it, sir." Later that evening, Lila and Ethan slipped out into the garden under the fairy lights. Mia was there too, twirling with a flower crown, giggling as the wind caught her hair. "Daddy," she called, running up, "you didn't tell me the lady from the drawing was real." Lila laughed, lifting Mia's hand. "I told you I'd meet her one day." Ethan looked at them both, the two souls who had unknowingly saved him, and felt the last of his loneliness melt away. Under the glowing lights, he whispered, "Wrong table, right life." Lila smiled through happy tears. Exactly. A year later, the Bennett mansion was almost unrecognizable. The air no longer carried the weight of silence. It was alive with laughter, music, and the scent of garden roses that Lila insisted on planting herself. The once cold marble halls now held warmth. Framed paintings of smiling faces, children's drawings taped to the walls, and sunlight spilling through every window. In the center of it all stood a long oak table, the same one where deals worth millions were once signed. But today, it was set for something entirely different. A family dinner. Ethan Carter glanced around nervously, smoothing the collar of his shirt. His hands, still rough from years of labor, didn't quite match the polished silverware or crystal glasses before him. "You look perfect," Lila said softly beside him, catching his unease. He turned to her, still as breathtaking as the day they met, her smile brighter than any chandelier in the room. "I feel like I'm sitting in the wrong seat again," he admitted with a grin. She laughed, the sound full of warmth. "You're not. You're exactly where you belong." Charles Bennett entered the room, a gentler man than the one who had once stood before cameras declaring who was fit for his daughter. His hair had more gray now, his posture a bit less proud, but his eyes carried something new, humility. "Evening," he said, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Dinner's ready. And before anyone starts eating, I'd like to make a small announcement." Lila and Ethan exchanged glances. Charles raised his glass. "A year ago, I was a man who measured worth by the weight of a bank account. Then a mechanic," he paused, smiling faintly, "taught me that real value can't be counted in numbers." Ethan tried to look away, embarrassed, but Lila squeezed his hand. Charles continued, "Today, this family isn't just the Bennetts. It's the Carters, too." He turned toward Mia, who sat happily coloring at the table. "And young lady, you may call me Grandpa from now on." Mia's face lit up. "Really?" Charles chuckled. "Really?" The room filled with laughter, soft and genuine. After dinner, they moved to the conservatory, the same place where everything began. The Bentley still gleamed under the soft lights, now restored completely. But beside it stood something new, a small easel displaying one of Lila's latest paintings. It showed the old cafe where the fateful blind date had been arranged. 2 tables side by side, one empty, one occupied by a man and a woman whose eyes met by mistake. At the bottom corner, in delicate handwriting, were the words, "Wrong table, right destiny." Ethan stared at it, a lump forming in his throat. "You painted this from memory?" Lila smiled. "From feeling. It was the day everything changed." He brushed a thumb across the frame gently. "You still think it was fate?" "I know it was," she said. "You didn't just fix my chair or my heart, Ethan. You fixed us, me and my father. You reminded him what love looks like." He shook his head modestly. "I didn't do anything special." She laughed softly. "You showed up. That's the most special thing anyone's ever done for me." Outside, Mia's laughter echoed as she chased fireflies in the garden. Charles watched her from the veranda, his heart softening at the sight. He turned to Ethan quietly. I never thanked you properly. Ethan looked surprised. You don't have to, sir. I do, Charles said firmly. You gave my daughter back her courage and gave this old man a second chance to be a father. He extended his hand. Welcome to the family, son. For a moment, Ethan hesitated, then clasped it strong and steady. Later that night, as the guests left and the house fell quiet, Lila wheeled out onto the terrace. The moon hung full above them, bathing the world in silver light. Ethan followed her, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. Remember the first time we met? She asked, smiling into the night. You looked like you wanted to disappear. I did, he said, chuckling. A blind date gone wrong, no money in my pocket, and somehow I ended up at a billionaire's table. I thought my bad luck had reached a new level. Funny, she murmured, eyes glistening. I thought my life had ended that year, and then you walked in. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the soft rustle of the trees. Finally, Ethan said, You ever wonder how different things would have been if I'd sat at the right table that night? Lila turned to him, eyes glowing in the moonlight. Then we never would have met, and the right table would have been the wrong one all along. He smiled. Guess fate doesn't need directions. From the garden below, Mia's voice rang out again. Daddy, Miss Lila, come see my fireflies. Ethan rose, offering his hand. Lila took it, letting him guide her down the steps, not because she needed help, but because she loved the way his fingers fit around hers. Together, they joined Mia, watching the little jar flicker with light. Look, Mia said proudly. They're glowing. Ethan crouched beside her. Just like you, kiddo. Lila smiled softly, eyes misting over. Charles watched from the balcony, his heart full, whispering to himself, her mother would have loved this. Later that night, when Mia fell asleep and the house grew still, Ethan and Lila stood beneath the stars. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a delicate silver ring. Simple but beautiful. Her breath caught. Ethan, I can't buy you the world, he said quietly, but I can promise to spend every day making you smile. Tears shimmered in her eyes. You already have. He knelt, not out of formality but love, and slid the ring onto her finger. The moment her trembling hand rested on his, the night around them seemed to glow brighter. Wrong table, he whispered with a grin. Right life, she finished softly, leaning forward to kiss him. Months later, their small repair shop opened under a new name, Right Table Motors. A framed photo hung behind the counter, the 3 of them laughing under the Bennett garden lights. Below it, a handwritten note read, Sometimes fate takes you to the wrong place, so you can find the right person. Months later, the restaurant where it all began had become a favorite spot for Ethan and Isabella. It was no longer a place of awkward beginnings or painful memories. It was a symbol of second chances. Tonight, fairy lights glimmered over the patio. Soft music played in the background. Ethan sat nervously, fidgeting with the small velvet box in his pocket. He had been planning this for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. Across from him, Isabella was radiant in a pastel dress, her wheelchair adorned with a small bouquet of white roses. Her laughter floated across the evening air as she teased him. You look like you're hiding something. Me? Never, he said with a grin, though his pulse quickened. Just then, a waiter approached. The same waiter who had once watched Ethan walk in nervously months ago. The man smiled knowingly as he placed a single candle on their table. On the house, he said quietly. You two remind us what love really looks like. Ethan took a deep breath and knelt. Awkwardly, a little clumsily, but with all the sincerity in the world. Isabella, he began softly, the night I sat at the wrong table, I thought I'd ruined my life. But instead, I found you. You showed me that kindness still exists, that love isn't about what we have, but who we are. Her eyes glistened with tears. Ethan, he opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring with a small diamond, elegant and pure, just like her. Will you marry me? For a moment, time stood still. Then, through happy tears, Isabella nodded. Yes. Applause broke out across the restaurant. Even a few staff members clapped, remembering the day the poor dad sat at the wrong table. And in that same spot where fate had made its first move, Ethan and Isabella sealed their future. With laughter, love, and the memory of a blind date that wasn't meant to happen but was meant to be. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heart-touching stories about fate, love, and second chances.